Can you tell me more about how you got onto that Blackfoot Reservation? What I told my wife recently, 'cause we were watching Yellowstone, and I don't know if you're up on the series at all.
I haven't watched it, but people keep telling me I should, so I think I will.
You lived a better life than this entire show, so you'd just be like, "Pff, lame, whatever. This is stupid, stupid John Dutton. That guy's fake." Um, so in one of the more recent episodes, um, one of the one of the Dutton sons or whatever, his wife is Native American, and he's through, not just because he's married into it or whatever, he actually like is part of like the Native American, like her reservation community. And so he was like part of like a sweat and all these other things that they do. And I'm like, that would be so crazy to experience this culture that way. And my wife's like, yeah, that'd be cool, but like, why? And I'm like, because it's so tight knit, like from like being, let's be real, a white outsider or whatever, they're not exactly like, come on in, come join our sweat. Let's do we're gonna do oh my gosh, they do them at the Adams Center in Missoula. I forgot what it's called.
Like a powwow.
Thank you. That one. That one. See, I can't even think of the name. So like, they're definitely not going to let me participate in any of that thing, any of that stuff. So like, how did you get into that situation?
Uh, Completely by accident. Um, I had a horse farm over in Havre. My mom and I, when I was in my early 20s, and a big fire hit the Browning area and the East Glacier area. And someone told me that there were people over there in dire straits that had livestock and no way to get them out. So at that point in my life, my business was interstate horse hauling. I had a truck and a trailer, and I hauled horses for people for money.
Hmm.
And so I reached out to the reservation over there and just put out the word like, "Hey, I have a truck and a trailer. I haul horses. If anybody is in an emergency, please call me. I will come out and move your animals for free." And I was put in touch with this guy named Bob Blackbull, who ultimately was the owner of that program. Someone said, "Man, he's got 150 horses out there on this piece of property, and this guy does not own a horse trailer." So someone gave me his number, and I called him up and had this conversation with him. He was actually in the middle of evacuating his horses. Someone else had shown up with like a stock trailer, and I said, "Can I help?" And he said, "Please do. I need help." So I went out there and met him, and it was one of those connections, like instant friendship. He was an elderly fellow, gray braids down to his waist, in it just in this dire situation with all these horses, his hands totally full, and not as much help as he needed. But luckily, like the day I got there, the fire had shifted and his ranch was no longer under threat. So he decided to leave the horses there. But I ended up spending the full day with him, just getting to know him and talking to him, and discovered that he had this program for Native kids that he was building. Um, at that point, I was volunteering for the Highline Therapeutic Riding Association over in Havre, which was all about working with disabled kids and autistic kids in a therapeutic setting with horses. So it was like physical therapy, it was kids that were developmentally disabled and needed to ride horses because it was good for their gait and that kind of thing. But I found out about what he was doing, and we got talking, and I had gone through a fair bit of training in equine assisted therapy. My great love was like the mental and emotional counseling aspect, not so much the handicapped riding aspect.
Hmm.
So we had this conversation. He said, "Man, you are exactly the kind of person I need in this program, because I've got all this stuff in line, but I don't have somebody that knows that part of like the therapeutic relationship between people and horses. And if you are willing to come and volunteer and be here, I will house you, I will feed you, I will treat you well, and I think we can build something really cool here. So of course I was like 22 at the time, and I just jumped on that. And
Oh yeah.
seriously, heck yeah, I'm on it, dude. And at that point, we had just lost our farm in the '08 housing crash. Um,
Oh no.
yeah, and so I was kind of afloat, and it was one of those perfect timing things. And offered me a place to go. He's like, bring your horses, come on down. I don't have a lot here, but I have a teepee and I have buffalo in the freezer, and I will feed you, and you can have the teepee. It doesn't have electricity or running water, but it's yours if you want to do this. So I jumped in, man, and it was an amazing experience.
That sounds awesome. It's one of those things that you just lent a hand. That's all you did. That's all you did. Something so simple, and like this door just is wide open to you for like this experience. That do you have like what kind of stories would do you have on like that kind of experience?
Um, well, I mean, it was interesting. Here I am, a white girl, walking into a program run by a Blackfoot man for Blackfoot kids, and there is some stuff around that. There was a lot of kids in this program were like, Whitey ain't got anything to teach me. I don't want to deal with you. Um, so I tried really hard to kind of keep myself in the background of a lot of the relationships and just really focus on having the horses do a lot of the work, which was
Okay.
important, and it worked. Because I couldn't step into the ring and teach directly a lot. There were some kids that were really open to it, but some that definitely were not. um,
Were you
so
ready for that at all? That kind of like aversion to you being there?
no, I went into it a little bit naive, like, oh,
Sure.
you know I have this skill and I can do amazing work and I can fix people and help. And I did not expect this, like, oh, we hate you. We don't want you here because you're not us.
Right.
um
So like you get welcomed with like open arms from the Blackfoot elder, and all of the younger generation is like, "Mm-mm, we don't want you here."
yeah,
So I'm sure that was like a very like, whoa, kind of like a shock kind. I'd assume.
it was it. And but it also it developed me. It kind of pulled me out of my ego and my self-aggrandizement, and put me in a position of like, you're here to facilitate. You're not here to prop yourself up or to look cool. So I ended up really having to rely on tools that I hadn't used before. Whereas before, the work I was doing with the equine therapy was I was very much in the driver's seat, and I was working with kids who were developmentally disabled, and so it was a lot of me guiding the process. And this is what we're doing today, and these are our activities, and we're going to go through it, and but it wasn't at all that way in that program. It was like I had to step back, I had to lean out, I had to put the horse in there with the kid. Sometimes I had to let them get their asses kicked a little bit to learn some things.
Mm,
I had to really get myself out of the middle of that equation, and just facilitate from a distance, which turned out to actually be better for everybody involved, and got them a lot further than if I had been meddling too much. And then, the other part
interesting.
of it
Okay.
was working with the horses directly. So I did a lot of horse training, just getting these horses safe enough for these kids to handle so that they wouldn't get hurt in the process. And then over time, after being there a while and developing relationships, and the kids started to see that, their elders were cool with me, and that took some time too for some of those people to come around. Um, they started to be more open to my input and listen, a little bit, and seek guidance from me a little bit, especially when it came to horsemanship specifically. But then there was also a lot of like calling in the people who they did respect. So we worked with the elders a lot in that setting. Um, we brought, like I said, Blackfoot language experts in to teach them their language, and we brought people in to teach them how to tan hides and to bring them these skills. So that, and there was kind of always this arc for these kids. Like most of them walked into that program extremely angry. Like they started out
Oh,
really,
sure.
really troubled and angry at the world, and they were coming out of this like poverty and drug culture, and a lot of violence. There's a lot of violent crime there. So it took them some time to kind of come out of that and decompress from that. And over time, they got nicer. Most of them. We had one kid in particular who um, was on his like third or fourth violent offense. I mean, he was heading for prison, and he came into the program and he was really explosive, and he was big. I don't know if you've spent a lot of time around the Blackfoot people, but a lot of them are like 6'5" and above. Um, so he was big. He was scary. He knew he could physically push people around, and he came into our program with that kind of mindset. He didn't want to be there. The court made him be there, so he was a tough nut to crack. But ultimately, what we did was we put him in with a horse that had violent tendencies, and we kind of let him work it out. And
Hmm.
he got his ass handed to him a little bit, and he got plowed into the dirt a couple of times, and he learned really quickly that his violent bullshit didn't work in that setting. So he had to start looking at other tools. He ended up graduating from our program and going on to become a professional horse trainer, and was absolutely extraordinary at it. And he, prior to that,
Wow.
he had no aspirations. Like he was dealing drugs and just angry, and he didn't have any goals or vision for his life. And the horses gave him that. So, we had quite a few of those over the time. But I did end up settling in, and getting into some relationships there that I wasn't just an outsider anymore. Um, but I will say, as a woman, there were places I was not allowed, and that
Okay.
was that was a little weird too. Like there you I'm not allowed in a sweat. That's just not done. Women are not allowed there. Um, and there were times around like I actually had to share personal details around my cycles, because they have this whole like set of rituals that they require, and they don't let women in the house unless they've been smudged with smoke when they're cycling. So I mean there were definitely some
Huh.
strange things I had to work around, and some things I had to go through to be there.
Huh.